but in the spirit of trying to move things along, we'll just let them come, okay? So I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Center Advisory Committee to order on April 30th at 4:30 p.m. And I'll do the roll call. So we're going to say Steve Dahlstart.
Here.
Dee Fisher.
Here.
Phil Lively.
Here.
Paul Tonelli.
Here.
Clyde Neridu.
Here.
And the library representative.
It's Tom Fortin, Deputy Director of the Library.
Tom Fortin, Directory. Oh, and Rick DeGoya is here. And Councilmember Dobby is the council representative, and myself, Elizabeth Lewis. So we have one member that Rose is, I'm sure, on her way. So I'm going to open it up for public comments. If there are any members of the public who'd like to. No? Okay. We determined in our last council meeting that Mark is a member of the public, and if he wants to make a comment, he may, as well as our videographer. So I'll close public comments, and I'll come to the regular agenda. Item number 3 is a selection of chair and vice chair. That is an action item, and I'd like to.
Madam Chair,
open.
I'd like to make a nomination.
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Elizabeth Lewis as the chairperson of this committee.
And I'd second it.
I move nominations be closed.
Wait a minute, that's really too.
All in favor?
Thank you very much, but I think that, with all due respect, thank you so much, Bill. I really want to open it up to our residents to take more of a leadership role in this, if I may. I mean, I'm happy to run the meeting if you want me to, but are there any other members of the committee who would like to be nominated? I mean, I was thinking I would like to nominate Rick DeGoya as chair and Steve as vice chair, or Steve as chair and Rick, I don't know, I'd like to open it up.
Thank you for thinking of me in that vein. I don't think I could commit to being a chair, but I could be helpful.
I'm hoping that you're going to be helpful. I'm depending on you to be helpful.
I would like to nominate Phil Lively either to be the chair or the vice chair.
No. No, thank you. I respect you.
Okay. So, Rose, you can come sit up here. We're just opening the floor for nominations of chair and vice chair.
Just in time. I nominate Rose Howe as vice
Wait.
chair. Gotcha,
I
Rose.
feel like I'm talking.
What happens when you're late?
Okay, thank you very much. Rose, this is for you.
Well, I also appreciate the suggestion. I'd be happy to be vice chair if you want to be chair. I mean, you are very familiar with this process. I think that we would all be very comfortable with you as chair.
I agree.
That's fine.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
I agree.
Okay.
I second that notion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you very much. And then I'll nominate Rick as vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Good, okay, so then I will just continue.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
sir. Mhm.
could I just make a suggestion here? I've already asked you, but number 4, Brown Act training. You know, I've held this Brown Act many times. I'm sure many of you have held it many times. Could I make a suggestion that we put it at the end of the agenda so that anybody that has not held it before can stay? Otherwise, we can all go.
I understand your sentiments. I would like to make one comment about that. We do have our assistant city attorney here tonight, and she also has a very important member of her family with her that I think would be better if we allowed her to do a quick overview of the Brown Act so that they can go on. Yeah.
Just the following does it takes about an hour.
Yeah.
Yes, no, this is the 2.0 version.
Maybe if you can be very quick so the people that have heard it won't be too bored.
Yes.
And then for those that haven't heard it, they can be in touch with you later to follow up, to get more detail.
Excellent. Jennifer, I'd like to open the floor to you, and
We've started with some high expectations, and I can do that, and be very fast.
good.
Good. So I think, so I'm Jennifer Larson, I'm the Assistant City Attorney, and you're right, my father usually does this training, but luckily for everybody, he's out of town, because his version is, he takes it very seriously, and the Brown Act is very, very important, and for no better reason than it limits liability. It's very important in and of itself. The public should know everything that's going on, and I think everybody agrees with that. From our perspective, it's risk management, and it's very important. So it's not hard. You don't need, if you were really to get into it, it does take at least an hour. We're here to serve as your resource. If you have any questions at any time, send an email, give us a call. It's better to be safe than sorry. So Grady, would you mind handing these out?
Oh, good, we have handouts.
I
I
would
was
help
hoping we
her.
would have handouts.
Yes, to each of the people at the table. Go right to the inside and hand them out. And I'm just gonna walk you through it. I know everybody can read. This is the 30,000 foot overview. This is Grady. Larson. Grady, yep.
Grady, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Did we ask Grady if we had a public comment?
We need a couple more.
We'd still be going. I think we have I think I brought just enough. If anybody else needs, and you can sit down, no, we're all set. Thanks, bud. So I'll just skip to the meaty parts, because you can take it back. One thing to note is that you are advisory to the city council. So, making any decisions, although your input is very, very important, obviously, just matters in how you conduct yourself. Which brings me to point 3. You may not use your title as a committee or commission member when you are out in town. You can't use it to get a better deal on something. I find this to be a little insulting, because I think we all know that. But where it really does come up is if you appear at a meeting, city council meeting, and you say, well, I'm a committee member, it can convey something that you may not want to convey, that somehow your opinion should be weighed more heavily. If you are appearing on behalf of the committee, you will be authorized to do so, and that's the only time you can identify yourself. And it just makes sense. It keeps.
Does that mean don't put it in your bio?
You can put it in a bio,
Yeah, because
certainly.
people do that, they put their
They
nonprofit
do.
stuff in there, yeah.
Yeah, and it shows that you have volunteer activity. I
Yeah.
think that's fine. I think it's more when you are, trying to get a quote on something, or
Okay.
you're a contractor at your
Don't
house.
use it to
and
influence somebody.
or to curry
Okay.
favor with somebody. There's sort of a common sense element there. If you have any questions, and people have in the past, feel free to contact us, and we can get you a really specific answer on it. So it brings me to the Brown Act. Basically, the public has a right to be in on everything. There are very few exceptions that are very specific, but in general, if you take nothing else away, just know that it is better to be open than it is to be closed or private. So if you want to have a meeting and 3 of you happen to run into each other at the grocery store and you want to have a chit chat about something, you can't do that if you're talking about the town's business. It's not hard to figure this out. I think you'll get the hang of it really quickly. I've put all the basics in here. There are exceptions, but I think it's better to ask for when an exception might apply and just go by the general rule. Meetings need to be noticed. You have to have an agenda. When you talk about things, they have to stick to what's on the agenda so that people at home reading that agenda know, do I need to show up? They need to be advised what's going to be talked about, and it's just fair notice. So that is one really important thing. The way, you have staff members present, we have a lot of experience, and certainly a lot of people are trained in the Brown Act, so I think there's enough information here that it will go very well. I don't think we're concerned about it. Yep.
Jennifer, we have 7 town residents on this committee, plus 2 council members. So we have a committee of 9. So what would be our Brown Act quota of?
It's still the same.
3?
Still 3.
Only 3?
What's that? What's
Not
that?
4?
It's not 4?
It's not a quorum.
Well, it
Because
says
4
here-
is less
No,
than a
no, no, no.
majority.
It says here quorum equals half plus 1.
Okay, well, there you go. Then half would be, so 5. If you have that, then that would be the number.
Okay, so
I,
there could be 5 of us.
Does that mean that 2 of us could talk
Could be
about
4.
anything about the
you
board?
can. But it gets tricky when you have two people talking about something, because let's say the two of you talk, and then the two of you talk, and then the two of you talk, oh, well, he said this. Now you're starting to, it is, and now you're starting to have sort of a general sense, and there are communications going on behind the scenes. And the public doesn't like that. They have a right to know, this is how you felt about it, and you convinced Elizabeth, and then, you know, she responded with this. All the communications are supposed to go on out in the open. And so it's, I think, a good rule of thumb is to just not have those conversations.
The biggest challenge with that, Jennifer, sorry, I might interrupt you there. The biggest
Okay.
challenge with communications in this day and age is email.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful that if the staff can send a blanket email out to all of you about the agenda and even provide you with some discussion information that we're going to be talking about in some detail. But if you reply to that email, and you reply all of it, you provide your own feedback on that particular issue, you just violated the Brown Act. Because now everybody's got your feedback with respect to that issue. That has to wait for the public discussion.
So it's very tricky. And, you know, mistakes are made, and nobody's going to come after you with a gun. You know, I mean, it really is. They can be corrected, but it's so much better if you just think about the purpose and the spirit of it. It usually kind of guides with
You know,
common sense.
Teresa or whoever BCCs us, you can't, nobody's gonna be able to reply all.
Yeah.
That's one workaround, that removes that knee-jerk.
To be, however, I think when she sends something out, it's not a good thing for her to blind copy anybody, because you need to know what the message is being sent.
Well, I assume it's to the
who message is being
committee,
sent
yeah.
Well, all staff members actually, have an obligation that any email that we send out, and I've got a little disclosure at the bottom of my email when it goes out, says this is a public document. If you reply to this, it's a public conversation, anybody can get hold of it. So if I'm blind copying people on email, that, from the public's perspective,
Oh, God.
it doesn't really look all that
Yeah.
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 above board.
Got it.
So in general, you know, this is the place to have your conversations. Obviously, there are times when you're communicating with staff or whatever you're doing, and that's fine, but in general, you know, opinions should be formed here as much as possible when the conversation occurs.
Really quickly, can you kind of comment about how ad hoc committees may work?
Yes, so ad hoc committees are an exception, and it's when you want to kind of take something and really work on it, and it's not appropriate for the whole group. I think I have it. So yeah, non-standing advisory committees. If it's less than a quorum, those are allowed.
Okay.
And I believe you are the one who would appoint people to those.
And it's not approved by council, it's because once it's approved by council, then it becomes a Brown Act committee.
Exactly.
So an ad hoc committee then can go and work in a team.
Yep.
You can get other residents to be part of that team.
Yep.
You can all communicate within the other, and, you know, maybe 3 people of this committee would be then ad hoc
Yes.
committee members.
And those can be very useful, you know, for something that would take just too long to do in the big group. Okay, so then I have things about, you know, you have to give the public a right to comment, reasonable time limits are fine. This one does come up, I don't, hopefully it will not be this kind of year, but you never know, that you can't prevent criticism, but personal attacks, threatening behavior, you know, so if somebody comes in and they really don't like something that you're doing and they want to be mean to you, they can do that for 3 minutes. As some of you sort of know. Obviously, they can't be threatening or, you know, truly vulgar, but it's kind of the way it works. So that is it. You will be glad, Mr. Dobby. That is it for the Brown Act. Now,
Boy, I'm sorry.
we're banging it out.
I'm going to tell your father, no one.
Everybody said that. Conflicts of interest. This is one that I would argue is pretty important because you can get in a lot of trouble. There's a huge common sense element here, but there's also personal liability. So you don't want to get in trouble with a conflict of interest. It's where there's a financial conflict of interest. So you need to disclose your financial interests and assets, and you need to disqualify yourself if you have an interest in a decision that's before you. So basically here, because there's no businesses, it really comes down to where your property is located. So if it affects you, usually staff will jump in and say, you have an issue here, When in doubt, disqualify yourself. We always prefer that. It is not something you should feel bad about. It doesn't mean that you're not qualified to make a good decision or have a good opinion. It just means that, even if there's the appearance of impropriety, it just reflects poorly on everybody. So when you are disqualified, you have to leave the room. You can't be present for any of the discussion, deliberation, any of that. You just need to go out there and hang out and then have somebody come and get you whenever that matter is resolved. It's pretty.
So does anybody live within 500 feet? That's kind of what it comes
I
down to.
don't know.
We used to have
500
somebody.
feet. And they published, Teresa has a map,
Mm.
basically
Oh, yeah.
showing everybody who 500 feet is.
I don't think any member of this committee
Yeah.
is within 500 feet of the town center.
Right.
Good. That should take that right off. There's no protest if you don't need it. Disqualify. Avoid the perception of financial impropriety. Payment and reimbursement. I don't think that will come up for this committee because there's not really the expenditure of any sort of money. That's basically it. Decisions of this committee are advisory. You already know that. Okay, this actually is a tiny little one, but it is important. That every matter needs to be decided based on information in the record, even if it's advisory. So when you make a decision, whatever you're doing, as a lawyer, I think you're very trained to do this, but it's very important that if you're thinking something that you say it, and that the decisions that you make, because then you can go back in time and look at the record, and everything just is easier to understand. It's just better to put everything out there, say it, and establish a good working record so nothing in the future looks arbitrary. You've explained your rationale. I think that's pretty straightforward. And if you have any questions, when you are in doubt, contact us. My father is in the office every Tuesday and Wednesday. He holds office hours. He is there regularly. Ironically, not this week, but I don't think he has missed much in the time that he's been here. And email is always great, and cell phones too. So
Thank you.
What is the email address?
Thank you very much.
I can actually, we have the city one.
Maybe you could send an email to the committee and say just how you
Yeah.
reach us.
I will do that too. All right, thanks for your time. Sorry
That's
to be
okay.
so technical, but
Yes, sir.
I need to hear.
I appreciate it.
Bye, Grady.
Bye. Okay, good. Moving right along. Item number 5 is the distribution and discussion of historical and current materials. We're gonna let our city engineer, Gordon Siebert, take over from here. I think that he's got some information we want to kind of go over.
Sure. There's been a lot of background information on both the town center library and the town center. This is a slightly different project, as you all know, because the library is not going to be going in the park. We have endeavored to put all of the background information on the town's website. So for those of you who don't want to have a lot of paper, it's available. For those of you who would like to have paper and would like help or assistance in printing out any documents, just let me know. And I can give you my email pretty easily. It's gsiebert, S-I-E-B-E-R-T, and then the rest is the same for the city, ci.atherton.ca.us. And for anybody who wants, I'll get a card. We put some historical information in your binders, and it's what's known as an architectural program, which basically means that's what the people who are using the facilities or plan to use the facilities say they need or they want. There can be lots of different programs. Somebody can say, I need an office that's 20 by 30 feet, and someone else may say, no, I think an 8 by 12 is good enough, or 6 by 8. So you have some information, and this is public information. This was made available through the 2 committees for the library and for the town center. The other major item that you have in your binder are 2 pages. They overlap, they join, and they are the site. We have about 4.5 acres between Maple and Fair Oaks, and goes over to the railroad. It doesn't go quite to the railroad. It's about maybe 10 or 15 feet off of the platform. And then the little station is excluded from the town's ownership. But interestingly, part of the parking lot that you see is not actually a street. It's used as a street, but it's town property. In addition to which, public agencies have a unique ability that none of you have with your own property. We sort of own the street, so we can do what's called a vacation. Doesn't mean the street goes to Hawaii. It means the street would no longer need to be used for street purposes, or could be narrowed, etc. So when we wrote the charge to the request for proposal to the master plan staff, we said, think big, think inventive. If you want to propose changes in the circulation, if you want to propose changes in the parking, or changes in the street rights of way, feel free to do so. So I wanted to make sure you all knew that. So that's kind of the historical information. Then we have some current information, and our chair will talk about that in a moment. But all of you have the 5 proposals on the website. Is the request for proposal that was used to solicit these, and we went out fairly broadly to solicit them. In addition to which, there's a set of questions and answers, although there weren't very many questions that came in from the proposers. So that information is available to you. I have done a kind of a summary of these proposals, but I didn't want to pass them out because it's going to depend on how you decide you want to evaluate these proposals in order to develop them. One other thing I will just describe, and since Jennifer did such a good job of going quickly through the law, state law has what's called qualifications-based selection for professional services: architects, engineers, surveyors, attorneys, and auditors or accountants. And so we're following that law, so the process to use is to select the best qualified firm or firms, and then once we select them, we can negotiate a contract with them and a fee. I do have in a separate sealed envelope the fee proposal from each of these 5 firms, not to be opened until after this committee working with us has made a selection on who the top firm is. So then that way you don't get prejudiced on the value or cost of the thing, but you can get that information and use it as part of your decision-making process.
Thank you, Gordon. I'd like to let our city manager introduce our staff team at this time so that you all can become familiar. And I apologize, I was thinking that we should have introduced all of our committee members, in the very beginning. So maybe we'll do that at the end when we close. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mayor. I was remiss at the beginning. We have a project team for staff that consists of myself, City Manager George Roderick, for those of you who have not met me. We've got Police Chief Ed Flint, Gordon Siebert, as he's just been talking, our city engineer, and Tom Fortin from the library. That's the staff project team that we're dealing with. So any Q&A that you might have as we go along, feel free to contact any of us respective disciplines for that information.
Any members of the committee want to make a comment?
Gordon, I just wanted to make sure, if we wanted to close Station Lane, we could do it, right?
Yes. Only you as the council have that power.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying the council or the town.
On judicious thought.
Or Ashfield?
I'm not saying.
Any public road, now there are procedures prescribed in state law for doing that vacationing. So it's not solely at your, well, it is solely at your discretion, but utilities that have easements in them could object, adjacent property owners could object. FedEx could say, we don't want you to close it. But yes, you have that.
Station light.
The fire department and everybody else.
Everybody else, yes.
And that would apply to any of those 3 streets?
Yes, great.
And my other question is on the train parking lot here, there's been some discussion about how much of it we own and how much of it Caltrain owns.
I could paint the little survey markers, but they're out there, they're about the size of a quarter, but they're in the asphalt. And you can look at the plans that are in your binder and then go walk over to the parking lot and see. It's about the depth of a car, so about 15 feet for the parking spaces that are closest to the tracks is approximately railroad property. So most of the parking lots are on town property.
Okay. So, Gordon, can I just ask, the little site plan has yellow printing on it that I'm unable to read. And I'm just wondering, how important is that yellow legend and text for looking at this?
I'm sorry, I don't remember what was in the yellow, if I can take a look.
I don't know.
Okay, you made them a colored version.
Can't read it.
Here in black and white, okay. You know, I'm gonna have to get back to you and the committee on that, because I don't know what that information is either. The most important is really the property lines that I think show up quite a bit better on the site plan.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I mean, for example, I can show you because our trailer is here, or actually, I guess here. There's a little survey marker about there that I can see. So you see the park, it's just basically the spaces themselves that are on the railroad property. The access is this is all town property. Now, as I mentioned, there's a little bit of a jog around the station.
Okay. Okay.
Madam Chairman, I had a couple of questions. Gordon, do we have I know where you're outlining where the boundaries are, but do we have an accurate survey of all the edges of the property so we know exactly where it is?
Yes, these documents are from a licensed land surveyor.
Okay. Second question, on that one over there, it's big enough to see some of the heritage trees, but do we have a good heritage tree inventory of what's on the property?
Our town arborist, Kevin Kilty, I've asked him to prepare that heritage tree inventory, and he's going to be doing so in the next few weeks.
Good. And number three, along the same line, do we have or will we have a location of all utilities above and below the property, so if we start to do something, we won't run into somebody, oh, you can't do that, there's a 60-inch main running there.
We do not currently have that. As part of the master plan, we would charge the designers to gather that information from the various utilities.
Can I just interject
Fine.
your question?
Yes.
From my experience of running projects like this, it's usually more efficient to have the survey company that did the property survey include that information with the survey so that it's charged to the town. We have one source to go back to.
We can do that. Now, that contract, that process was done quite a few years ago, so this firm is no longer under contract to the town. We could certainly engage a civil engineering firm or survey firm to gather that information. But that's why we could, and most of the firms that have proposed have civil engineering subs. So, but the town could gather that information as well.
I think that's a very good recommendation, because charging it through the master plan consultant, might, he would have to
delays
hire
as well.
somebody
Yeah.
and then, add his fee on top of that.
Right. And the more information they have at the front end,
Mhm.
the process is done. I have one more question as well. This is sort of a controversial thing, which is high-speed rail. Nobody knows if high-speed rail will happen, but if it were to happen, has anyone given any thought to what the impact would be on our property along the tracks?
That point was also made in the request for proposal, and so you'll note that several of the consultants spoke specifically to that. But that would be part of the process. They'd have to collect information from the Joint Powers Board on the potential impacts. But as you point out, we don't know. You could make a decision, and it could change some point in the future. But yes, it was factored into the RFP and proposal process.
Just maybe, Phil, you might want to speak from the rail committees. And we have a member of the public, Greg Conlon has joined us, that Caltrains has indicated that they're only going to allow high-speed rail to use the existing 2 tracks and not do a 4-track system. So that would hopefully not,
That's the so-called.
Not the total story. They want to have passing lanes in certain areas.
in certain areas.
And they put out the report where they've recommended that to be considered.
Yes.
That's the so-called blended system.
The
Yeah.
blended system, and whether or not those passing lanes, if it's one passing lane or two passing lanes, and whether or not that would come through our stretch is yet to be
If you want my personal opinion,
Yes,
back in their little wee minds,
yes.
is a 4-track system.
Yeah, my understanding is that the high-speed rail authority has not accepted that one system, that they talked about it, but my understanding is that they haven't agreed to that.
Okay, we have a member of the public that would like to speak.
Well, I think the, two things. There is agreement that I'm not sure it was signed, that does have the authority signing up for the blended system. And so I think that their intent is to do that, to agree to 2 tracks except for the passing one. But, you know, I think that realistically, or the probability of going to 4 tracks is, I think, still there. You know, I just want to mention that a couple of years ago, they had a vignette, or what do they call it?
Charrette.
Charrette of a 4-track system. And we spent 2 days with going through each town, and we laid out a system for Atherton with a covered trench and where all the buildings would go. And if we could figure out where that is, we should probably have a copy of it someplace. Or, and Yorko, is that her name?
Yuriko?
Yuriko, she
She's a
conducted it,
chef
so
emeritus.
she may have a copy of it.
Yeah.
But we had a full display of what it would look like with a covered trench and what could be done with the Civic Center.
Yeah. That would
So if you
be
could find that.
optimal if we could do a covered trench.
But I think coming back to the original question
Exactly.
Clive raised, which is, we don't know where that boundaries will be yet.
I think the concern is when they put the Caltrain on the elevated tracks through San Carlos some years ago, they had to create a temporary line alongside for a couple of years while they built the embankment.
Yes.
So I'm envisioning that could happen here. So yes, we might end up with a 2-track system where it is today, but in the meantime, they've taken a swath of land 100 feet wide while they built a temporary.
Well, San Carlos was a different option because the city owned all that land.
And
there
they're
was
not
nothing
gonna
in
do
it.
an embankment, it's not gonna be a
Yeah.
raised system.
But if they were gonna dig a trench, you'd have a similar situation because you can't dig the trench under the existing tracks while they're operating. I don't think.
Well, my recollection is that they only need 8 feet to get 4 tracks.
On this side, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And they do the 8 feet on the other side?
Well, I don't know on the other side, but we measured it off one day and they needed 8 more feet to get 4 tracks.
Okay.
So we assumed it would be on this side.
So as we're thinking about building siding, it's probably not
Yeah.
next to that boundary.
Right, exactly. Okay. Any other committee member comments? Phil?
I got one more.
Okay.
The library's on our plate too, and one of the things that I would hopefully suggest to those of you who have not read it is the library seismic report. Tom, I guess that's still over there someplace in the library. And the library final EIR, which contains all kinds of interesting information about the library and also the survey of traffic in and around the town center. Both of them are fairly heavy documents.
I have a question about the firms who, oh, sorry.
Excuse me, and I think that EIR is on the website.
I believe it is.
The library
Maybe.
EIR is on the website, but it is a very lengthy document. And maybe what we could do to help facilitate the council, this committee, is to maybe call out that particular portion of it that would be pertinent. Because there's a lot in that EIR that would not pertain to this immediate, right?
That's right, I think it's site-specific, the EIR, and I
They
think
do,
this,
they do traffic surveys because they rejected the town center, so that's all in there too.
right, that's a good tie-in. As far as the seismic report, that might be predicated on location too, so,
Oh, it's this building right here.
oh, it's this
So
one.
it's the current,
The existing-
okay.
existing building size.
Oh, so I see, they did that.
And that needs to be attended to.
And we have a seismic report for this building.
Yeah, we do.
not very good.
Well,
Definitely covered.
yeah, definitely. They'll be damaged, but, I don't think it'll fall down on us, depending on.
So Elizabeth, while we're still on this item, so on the distribution of, discussion of historical and current materials, did we, the two town center architects who presented to the whole town
Okay,
are not here? Is this the
You're-
topic we're on?
so we're gonna go to the next
Number-
topic. Yeah,
number
so-
5?
Yeah, no, if you just, we're gonna go to the next one, right?
Oh,
number
this
6.
isn't part of current
Yeah,
materials? Okay,
right.
sorry, misunderstood.
So, can we move on? We'll, as we flesh, this is a pretty just, general overview. As we get further in, we'll make sure that there's more information disseminated that is specific to this site and what we're doing here.
Just one other question before we move on from that item 5. I saw on the That's a Wrap Council document, there was one item that said that the town council had required this committee to recommend library size by July, so within the next couple of months. So-
Can we discuss, that needs a big discussion today, I hope.
That hasn't actually even met the council's discussion yet, so that's on the
But
May
you had it in
agenda.
your, you
I
had
had
it
it
in
in
your
the May, I had
report.
it in the report that the council colleagues memo had wanted to add that item to the city council's agenda. So that's been added to the May agenda for the actual city council to discuss whether or not they want to charge this committee with that task.
It's not in our bailiwick
Correct.
Yeah. It was a colleague's memo that we're addressing in May. Let's go on to item number 6, sorry, which is the Civic Center Master Plan, the proposals we've received, and the consultant selection, how we're going to manage that with our committee, and I'll let Gordon kind of brief us on what we've got so far, okay?
Thank you. You have 5 proposals that were received. The solicitation went out to the architects, including those that were involved in the master plan, or I'm sorry, in the
Town center.
in the town center competition, design competition. And I have not communicated with them as to why they did not choose to propose as part of the master plan process. And it'll be up to this committee as to what you do when you get to that item for architect selection. But nevertheless, they are not among the 5 firms that were proposing for the master plan.